All right. I think first, when it comes to an optimal educational system, I think I'll go with the word effective. An effective educational system.
Now, we see that
It's
recently there has been a lot of loopholes in our educational system, and the current loopholes or challenges we face in our educational system are majorly.
Young people are not really interested in getting an education to impact their society. And there's a lot of distraction on social media too. When you see people living very glamorous lives, when you see young people, making it big and
The
living.
education as in its own does not stand alone. It is operational within a
Mm.
system called Nigeria. So
Let's
any
put more funding in it. Let's put more opportunities. Let's put more expertise to really train these people who have.
so a
And
society where the system is present would look like a society that is educated. And I think when we understand like what education implies, we can see in this society that there is progress in every sphere or in every sector. So at the end of the day, the true proof of an effective educational system is seen in literally every other sector of a society. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ogochukwu Azubogu. I'm a Christian, I'm a medical student, and I am an innovator.
hi guys, I'm Sylvia, and I'm a medical student too, but I've always been a critical thinker, and I recently became a Pan Africanist. I'm so happy to be here, so happy to speak to you, and I hope we have a swell time together.
Hi, my name is Onyema Godwin. I am a medical student and a data analyst. I'm interested in a lot of issues, education, geopolitics, name it. Thank you.
So I think it's multifactorial, really, because there are different things to consider apart from funding, apart from socioeconomic factors, motivation, intelligence. There's so much to think about, but I would say the indices for a good educational system should be universal, yeah, and it should be globally acceptable. That's one. It should be current. It should be it should solve the needs or the problems of a particular country apart from just global problems. It should solve the immediate needs first before um that of the world. I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, so about the factors that make a country's educational system optimal, I think that one of the most important things is that a country's educational system should match what, just like she was saying, the country's needs, and then the industries of the country, what the particular industries of that country need, and also what the global industry needs. There should be an alignment between what is being taught in school and what is obtainable in the practical workplace. I think there should also be reasonable infrastructure to support it, because if not, without the right building blocks, everything will go to waste. And I also think that the quality of teachers also matter. The kind of training that the teachers in the school, the kind of teachers in the training colleges or university or wherever the teachers themselves are trained, it also goes a long way in making the education of a country optimal.
All right. I think first, when it comes to an optimal educational system, I think I'll go with the word effective. An effective educational system. It's a system that drives towards an end goal of education, and that system looks like a society where the system is present will look like a society that is educated. And I think when we understand like what education implies, we can see in this society that there is progress in every sphere or in every sector. So at the end of the day, the true proof of an effective educational system is seen in literally every other sector of a society. These are my thoughts on the factors that make it effective. I think first and foremost is a commitment to education. So this commitment to education looks like a number of ways. It looks like increasing funding to education. It looks like having governments that are that are laser focused on improving the educational sector. I know this to be true because I think we used to have this in Nigeria. I think in the 1950s we had over 40% of our budget allocated to education. So there is really a lot to glean when you see from the fact that an increase in funding almost always shows that commitment and almost always translates to an improved educational system. So that is one factor. Another very important factor would also be an educational system that is equitable, able to incorporate equitable and inclusive, and able to incorporate as many people into the system as possible. I think these are some factors that would make an educational system to be optimal. Because if we have something working for only like the top 10% of people, then I don't think we have much of an effective educational system in the large, like in the big picture. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to add something, right?
Okay.
So, just in addition to what um my co-host or my panelists just said, I would say that another indices, or rather another index to check for a good educational system would be um the enrollment rates, the dropout rates, the number of years people spend in school. So, for example, the average Nigerian child, what's the enrollment rate in Nigeria? How many kids can stay, or rather can afford to go to school without any breaks in their education? Then, how long do they stay in school? Are there factors that make their normal educational stay prolonged, like access to funding, and yeah, majorly access to funding to pay school fees and other things? Then what is the quality of the education they are receiving? Is it optimal, like my panelist said? Are they learning world global standard information? Is it yeah, is it solving global needs? Is it solving immediate needs too? So I think those are part of the indices to judge a good educational system.
Well, personally, I would lay more emphasis on, while I agree with you, Sylvia, I would lay more emphasis on the last thing you talked about than on the first. Because I think what we have in Nigeria is, in terms of the first group of indices you mentioned, where in terms of enrollment rate, length of stay, I think there's a problem with using length of stay to perhaps you also did mention that it was multifactorial, which I absolutely agree. But using the length a child, or the long length of time a child stays in school to judge, how good an educational system is, would really fall flat in a lot of situations. Because I think over here in the southeast, we have a I've noticed there's quite a high rate of enrollment, and everybody wants to see their child get to university. Everybody wants to see their child graduate from university. But then it doesn't equate to us saying that this educational system is optimal, right? So I really think that there is a place of seeing the effect of the educational system on every other sphere, which was the second thing I think you were trying to point to, more than the length of time people actually stay, because that has been dangerously deceptive for us as Nigerians over the past couple of decades.
Okay, why I would say it's an important factor is because let me give an example. Imagine a child in secondary school, he enrolls into JS one, and then because of, let's say, midway in his JS three, when as he was about to write his junior WASC, and then maybe he loses a parent and he can't continue his education, he can't further his education. There's something that delay does in in the mind of a person. So if you're stuck at one point for a long time, the motivation or the zeal to continue after so much breaks and gaps in your educational pursuits can make you, you know lose interest. Yeah. So in fact, what I just said directly is directly tied to the reason why people drop out, the reason for high
Yeah.
dropout. You understand? So I would say the length of stay matters.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I
would
think
say
I
that.
agree with you, because if I don't completely disagree on that point. I just think it's a less important point. Because if I do disagree, then it's also it also knocks off what I mentioned about the educational system being equitable, that being accessible to as many people as possible. So I do agree with you that enrollment rates matter, but I don't think they matter as much as the quality. Because I think back I was speaking with a couple of people, um okay, speaking with a couple of people, we talked about how most people, like 3 to 4 decades ago, or even more, perhaps like in the 1950s, they were graduating from primary school, then they would go for like teacher training. But the quality of education then was so much better that they were able to do a lot more with that
Yeah,
than what we have here with a huge percentage of people going to get postgraduate degrees. So in terms of that, I feel like length doesn't matter as much as depth, but I
for
think it's
sure. Yeah,
still like being accessible to a large number of the population is still a very important factor.
yeah,
We are just discussing about the factors that make a nation's educational system optimal. And looking at our country, Nigeria, you see that as much as the country has advanced in right from independence till now, we will see that recently there has been a lot of loopholes in our educational system, and the current loopholes or challenges we face in our educational system. And majorly, I would say that the country has not been able to, the education as in its own does not stand alone. It is operational within a
mm,
system called Nigeria. So any part of Nigeria or like finance, security, anything at all that is affecting the country is indirectly or directly affecting the education of its citizens, right?
Agreed.
So that is one. So in light of that, the Nigerian educational challenges cannot be treated in isolation. It cannot be treated in isolation. So I would say that the major challenge is currently facing the country is that the country, I think, has lost its value for education.
Agreed.
We no longer treat it as a top priority because I could remember you hear stories our parents would tell us, our older ones would tell us that there was a lot of incentive to go to school that time, right? With the fact of that you are going to employ directly. Everybody just basically wanted to be educated, but now everybody's seeing that education is just like second fiddle, something that you do if you have the opportunity, and some people are frankly completely excluded of it. They don't even have the opportunity of thinking about that, right? Then now coming to the Nigerian education system, I would say that insecurity is playing a factor currently in the education system now, though it has
True.
not, especially in the north at least, because most people will not want to send their children to school now. And with the current educational climate of the country,
Even in the West, because of the oil kidnap.
so imagine being a parent and you're hearing stories that your child did.
Yeah.
That is not an interesting situation. And then secondly, I think funding too. The country valued education at a point. At a point, the country's budget, education took a huge chunk of it.
True.
And just like what you were saying in the first, you are saying at first, that the way you put money to, that is where your heart will go to, right?
Valid.
And since Nigeria is no longer putting money in education, obviously it tells us that its heart has gone out of education.
Agreed.
Currently, the last 2025 budget, Nigerian educational budget was just about 6 point something percent. And the recommended UNESCO budget is 15 to 20, which is
20.
quite far.
Yeah.
So I would say funding is a very big challenge in Nigeria. And I will always go back to it again. The quality of teachers. Most of our teachers are leaving this country. There's no incentive to be a teacher in this country.
Yeah.
There is really no incentive to be a teacher in this country. And all of us, most people will still look at their teachers and say, nah, I'm not willing to be a teacher because of what this person is going through or what that person is going through. And the infrastructure and also the low high student to teacher ratio. There are way more students compared to the teachers. I could remember my stay in year one. Man, you see a very huge class, hundreds of students with just one lecturer. There's nothing that can really be done in that setting. Education is not likely to thrive under that setting. So infrastructure is a very, and funding especially, quality of teachers is a very big problem in terms of education in this country.
Okay, I would like to buttress what he just said about low morale on the part of students to go to school. Um, I think I might be wrong, but I think in the days of our parents and elders, right? So let's say in the 60s, in the 70s, when industry had just started booming in Nigeria, there was there was incentive to go to school because there was, how would I put it? There were places to work. You could use your degree or your certificates to get a job, as compared to now, where there's little priority on job creation and industrialization. So we find the average teenager in secondary school focusing more on her influencing career or
Yeah.
YouTube, TikTok videos. So young people are not really interested in getting an education to impact their society. And there's a lot of distraction on social media too. When you see people living very glamorous lives, when you see young people, making it big and living some lifestyles that are really desirable, those kind of, you know, those things distract people, like young people, from focusing in
Pursuing
school.
education.
I'm just thinking why, I mean, back in my time when I was in SS3, I was thinking about how to get, admission into uni. But the average 17-year-old girl is thinking about, how to hit it big, how many likes she has on TikTok, how she can, you know, if you get what I mean. I don't
Yeah,
know if you guys
absolutely.
get
I
what I
agree.
mean.
Absolutely agree with what you've said. I think that it's way beyond job creation. It's at some point I feel like yes, a huge incentive to go to school was jobs, but then it was also because people saw. I think the jobs were only a means to an end. The lives of people who went to school were to be desired. So it ties back to what Sylvia just said. When you see a life that is more desirable and that person did not necessarily have to go to school to achieve that, you begin to question certain choices. I think another perspective I have to this particular point is that it's really sad that even people who come out educated do not look that different from people who don't, not just in terms of money, but even in terms of their approach to problem solving. There are like a million people in the market in Onitsha main market who are graduates. You don't really see it in like the approach to trading. You don't see it in the initiative to start a business. Like there's really not much to desire beyond, even beyond like the monetary aspect of it, but like the general courage, and I feel like the discipline that even came with education up to 5 decades ago, it's not there anymore. So beyond the money, I think that education really lost its value in terms of a lot of other things. Because if we had an education that trained people to be critical thinkers, to look at a problem. We are really in an economy right now, that in a global economy right now, that rewards being able to spot a problem and build a solution and make money out of that. And I think that is something that education should be able to teach you to do. But right now, what we have is people learning these skills from alternate pathways. I think if we had an education that did that, we would be able to have, I think it would leave a little more than what we have to be desired out of having that education. I think a major effect of the challenges that we've mentioned when it comes to the educational system of Nigeria is the glaring lack of development in society, every part of society, even from as little as opening, perhaps like opening a shop to starting a conglomerate. There's just this deep deeply entrenched lack of initiative that is very obvious. um I actually I can't seem to figure out, you know how we're able to even make any progress with what we have so far. I think maybe it has a lot to do with the 1% that Daviri mentioned, that have access to this quality education in the country. But I think that's one major challenge of one major effect of a poor educational system in Nigeria. When it comes to solutions, one I think one place we can start from is training our trainers. In my opinion, I think if we can elevate the quality of training that we can get, we've solved majority of the issue of of education in Nigeria. Unfortunately, it's not a solution that comes in isolation. It's a solution that can only be implemented when the government chooses to make education their priority. Unfortunately, it's not something you can't train people on, like, mm, the minimum wage that we have a lot of teachers being paid. It's not possible to train people on that amount. It's not possible to train people on a budget that only allocates 6% to education. So unfortunately, that's a reality we have to deal with. But by improving the standards of training of the teachers, I think would to a large extent improve the quality of education. Because I really think that the challenge of the educational system is beyond a lack of content. When you look through the Nigerian curriculum for both basic and secondary education and even universities, they have month long meetings convening to structure these. They've structured these curricula for years, and it's flawless, it's beautiful. Well, not flawless, but it's really beautiful and immaculate. But I think a large problem has to do with implementation, which is why we need to train our trainers. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay, in addition to what she said, I would say one major problem or one major effect of our poor educational system is, will I say, the wastage of talent and skills, general wastage, and will I say, how do I put this? Like there's a lot of abilities that are left,
Untapped.
yes, untapped, and
Yeah.
they are left to lie fallow. So, for example, you see sometimes, occasionally you see some videos trending online of maybe a 7-year-old or 12-year-old boy who built um, something really amazing,
Genius. Yeah.
genius, and maybe he's not in school, he's out of school, but he has this knack for putting things
It's
together,
usually an
like,
airplane.
yes, or maybe he constructed a house. In fact, the most recent one I saw was somebody assembled a power bank together, like from
Oh
scratch,
my.
and it was really amazing. So I would say the solution to this is, let's go back to excuse me, let's go back to the former, let's say, educational system where we had skill acquisition, the informal training centers that we had. I think they were operational back in the day. So but this time around, let's put more funding in it, let's put more opportunities, let's put more expertise to really train these people who have. And now the problem, or the issue now, is to identify who these students are, or who these people are
Yeah.
with exceptional talent. I would say at primary school level, for example, children should be exposed to everything. So they should be exposed to humanities, arts, science,
Tech.
STEM, tech, everything, even up to like junior school. This idea of when you get to SS1, you pick disciplines according to your strengths. So let's say you didn't do well in science or basic technology in junior class, you're automatically an art student. We should expose kids to everything and a lot of things as much as possible so that we can spot whiz kids, people who have exceptional skills and talents, so that we can push them in that direction until they're able to, harness these skills, and they're able to, what's the word? They can contribute meaningfully to their society. So I was also making a point about secondary school education. This idea of, oh, you're not good in math, you're not good in basic science, you're not good in basic technology, so you're automatically an art student. I think it's not good, because at that level you should have a broad-based education. Science students should have an idea of the arts. They should be able to make meaningful contributions around topics surrounding government history. you know
True.
Art students too should be able to contribute meaningfully in science, topics and all. So I think we should make our educational system more robust at that level, instead of streamlining our children so early. I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys agree. Yeah.
Well, To add to what you say, you talked about identifying the whiskey early. I will tend to vary there or slightly disagree because the truth is that majority of the people will not be whiskies I mean whiskies in quotes because every child I believe has a special place that if they put in that person is bloody excellent in that area, right? So now, I think that generally, if you just create a good educational environment that will favor both the so-called risk kids and the normal average student, that you'll be surprised that that average student will turn out to be somebody very wonderful, right? And then two, about this stuff you said, especially in Nigerian universities, right? Because of how our secondary school was structured, most science students tend not to know jack about history, philosophy, government, nada. Although everything you know about each of these things came from you, maybe you reading on your own or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the same thing
Sorry.
also applies to the art students. A good number of them tend to struggle with what I'll call basic math
Yes.
that even if you're not a pure science student, you should be able to know and use because you still use it in active society, right? So that's that side. From what you're saying, the exposure like to those broad fields will at least make sense. Even maybe doing a minor in philosophy or something for
Yeah.
science students or history, at least it as 100 level or something like that will
Yeah.
go a long
No
way, right?
way. Yeah.
Then about effects, the effects of Nigerian education system, I would say poverty. It's one of the I think that's one of the things because a country can only go as far as its human capital development, right?
True.
And the fact that majority of Nigerians have poverty issue, there's no industrialization, just like what she was saying, no initiative. That means that there is something that we're really getting wrong in our education system. And just like you were saying, all these things are multifaceted and it also contributes to insecurity in this country, right? If someone does not have anything he's doing, wakes up every day, not nowhere to put his youthful energy, nowhere to put his energy, nothing. He does the next best thing, right? And which can be armed robbery, terrorism, anything at all. And the next thing, in as much as what the person is doing is wrong, you have to look, step back and look what is the environment that made this person to think that this is the best or this is the best that your life could ever produce, right? Then about what it also produces, it also creates a situation whereby the country cannot develop economically. We don't
Very important.
the country cannot simply develop economically without its educational system being robust because the people that will drive the industry, people that will bring the solutions to the economy, to health, to every sector, is from the schools that they come.
Yeah.
You can't bring foreign workers for everything, right? Foreign workers cannot be able to do everything. And only the indigenous trained workers can be able to produce things that are Nigeria or Africa contextualized.
Mm.
Do you understand? It's only
True.
Nigerians that can, to a very large extent, can be able to solve the problems, acute problems facing the country. So now, in terms of solution, I would I would say that the solution that we can offer is I think that as a country we need to orient ourselves, right? That if we are comfortable with the way we are currently, then we should not bother investing in our education. We need to see it as something that if we do, it will solve a lot of problems that we are hammering our head every day, from insecurity to poverty, from poverty, list it all
Absolutely.
these things hinge on education, right?
Yeah.
So if we are able to orient ourselves and see that in fact, even this thing we complain about, even the moral decadence or ethical issues or moral issues we complain
Mhm.
of in society, these people learned it somewhere, right?
Mhm.
All these things tend to start small, from the malpractice in WAEC to, in fact, across majority of the exams we write as a country, right? There's always one issue or the other about ethical problems or even certificates forgery and so many other things. All these things are what you end up seeing translating to national problems 10 years later, 20 years later. All right. So I think that if we're able to boost the funding, if as a country we make up our mind that a reasonable amount of funding will go into education, one, and two, there will be proper systems to track the use of that funding, because if you just put money into something and you don't monitor it, it's going to disappear. That's
Yeah.
just the way things are.
That's true.
It's going to disappear. So there should be proper accountability and other things to ensure that this and
curriculum too, right? Our curriculum should match the world-best curriculum. It's quite heartbreaking that in a world where people are talking about genetically modified foods, advanced agriculture, irrigation systems, and all. In some schools in this country, university students are still going to farm with hoes.
Serious.
With hoes, it does not make sense. The world has
Sheesh.
gone far from that. We can't be talking about dealing with hoes in this century. Even if you give the students hoes, how far are you training them? Subsistence farmers, are you training them to be commercial farmers that can feed the nation, right? That's the reason why we are always learning about agriculture, bedrock combination, da 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 da. And if the people you are training to play that role tomorrow are people that you are training with hoes and cutlass, what are they going to do? Is it hoes and cutlass that they will use to produce the food
They can't even
that will feed
compete
the country?
globally.
Exactly. So I think that's that. Funding, proper tracking of the funding, infrastructure, and the proper engineering of our curriculum to match both the Nigerian needs and global standards will go a long way in ensuring that our educational system becomes something that is productive.